Hi everyone and welcome to this extended episode of Ask the Ref. It's Callum Jones here, National Young Referee Development Team member, and I'm delighted today to be joined by FIFA and Premier League referee Anthony Taylor. Tails, first of all, how are you and how's lockdown been treating you?
I'm good, mate. Nice to see you as always. Yeah, really good, and obviously difficult times for everybody to work the way through, but I've been learning GCSE maths with the kids in A-level psychology, which is obviously a brand new experience for me. So we're probably performing better now than I ever did when I was at school. So,
and obviously we're all having to adapt, and I know you'll have to adapt your schedule, having no football. Have you been keeping yourself physically and mentally fit during this isolation period?
Yeah, so it's we have to kind of adapt to the situation as it progresses every week. So in the very early stages, we were always hopeful that games would start fairly soon, and so everybody was keeping on top of the usual training regimes as the restrictions allowed. But then obviously it become really apparent that the country's in a serious situation, and so it's very much treating like we would do things at the immediate end of a season. So maybe take the opportunity to take 1 or 2 weeks off from impact training, so any real high intensity running, and kind of reshape what you're doing training wise. So focusing on getting off your feet to a bit of indoor cycling, a bit of yoga, a bit of strength and conditioning if you've got any kind of weights at home for a couple of weeks before. Now, obviously now in the last week or two, we've started to ramp things back up again like a normal pre-season training program, because obviously there's some hope that at the top level games might start at some point and get the season finished.
So it's been 8 weeks now. How have you been able to keep yourself focused and mentally prepared for when the restart does, if it does happen?
I think one of the most important things is really to make the most of the time at home, and so don't be centred on football all the time. There comes a point where we're in danger of saturating everybody with football, particularly in refereeing. So now's the time where obviously the leagues lower down the pyramid were obviously curtailed early by the FA, but this time of year is the time where seasons will be finishing anyway. And so people really need to give thought about shifting priorities and shifting their mindsets on what they need to focus on. Usually at the end of May, and most people focusing on training high levels or reviewing video clips on a daily basis. Most probably not, because normally this is the downtime. But from our perspective, we need to be in a position where we're in a position ready to go whatever's decided when it's safe to do so. And it's really trying to find that balance of how do you focus on what needs to be done to do with your work, but then also you've got to get that balance away from football, do something different, read something, watch some extra films, whatever that may be, just to really keep things balanced and on an even keel.
So then, you've been saying that you've been learning some GCSE maths and A-level psychology.
Don't ask me to perform any maths for you, please.
Have you learned any new skills during lockdown, or what have you been doing to keep yourself busy away from football?
Yeah, so last year I completed a master's degree in sports coaching. So some of my focus has been just following up on some of the stuff I learned on that course last year, and obviously my development work that I do in terms of the core program. And really, it's a great opportunity for us to focus on the next 6 to 12 months in terms of getting some real preparation in over this summer period for those who might be selected for next season.
And obviously, you're Monday to Friday, most weekends, very, very busy with your Premier League commitments and your international commitments. How much have you really enjoyed just having time at home, away from football, to spend with the family that sometimes you may not have the chance to do?
The family might be ready for me to go back to work. Well, my wife's been working all the time, so the prison service have obviously still been working. So, it's always good to spend some extra time at home, and obviously spend some extra time with the kids and help them a little bit more rather than helping them remotely on Snapchat or text message or anything like that. But I'm sure they'll have almost had enough of me being around every single day saying, have you done this, have you done that, why are you not doing that?
It's been documented in the media, you've got yourself involved with the NHS volunteering. Can you just explain how that came about and what you've been getting up to?
Well, yeah. So the reason it came about is obviously it's well known that my sister's a doctor on the front line in acute medicine. So my thinking behind it all is that those of us who have ended up with a little bit of extra time on our hands to what we'd normally have, and those of us who have stayed fit and healthy, there's real scope for people to give give a little bit back to the local communities that we all live in. And it's not so much the NHS specifically, because a lot of the volunteering tasks I've been doing have been more related to local businesses and local schools. So a couple of examples that I've been involved in around Altrincham, we've had a couple of days where we've been delivering food parcels to the families of kids at one of the local colleges. So effectively like pupils who were involved in the free school meals program at primary and secondary school. Same with the college, so delivering to families who need a little bit of support and when obviously money is exceptionally tight. And then we also had an antique shop in the centre of Altrincham. The lady who ran that shop, she reconfigured what she was doing in this time. So we ended up collecting a lot of duvet covers, pillowcases, bed sheets, and she basically spent the last 6-7 weeks converting those into scrub bags for doctors and nurses at a couple of the local hospitals.
No, I commend you for that and giving you time back. There's a lot of people who may not have known that about you, and there's a lot of the lads from the select group who are doing the same. It's nice to see that maybe in the media that a different side to not just the man in black.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to put things in a positive light, and the more people understand what we're about as individual people, rather than just somebody who's perceived to be there to upset everybody on a Saturday afternoon, can only reflect positively on refereeing as a whole.
And of course, before the coronavirus shut down football, your last game was PSG versus Dortmund in the Champions League, which was behind closed doors. So how was that experience for you?
Well, people will have mixed views on what games behind closed doors are like, particularly from an officiating perspective. So some would say that it's a totally different ball game. There's no atmosphere. There's no intensity to the games or anything like that, and that's true to a point. Obviously, that with there being no crowd, there's the dynamics of how the crowd influence player behaviour and the atmosphere of the game is different for sure. But on the flip side, that means that every single thing that you say to a player can be heard. And there's a couple of examples from that Paris game where the live footage actually picked me up saying quite a few things to players. And So it's important to remember that. But again, we can use that as an opportunity maybe to showcase how good we are as match officials at interacting with the players on the field, rather than be scared of saying, right, I can't speak to anybody because they're going to hear me. So there's no harm in people hearing you, particularly if it puts what we do in a more positive light to what people are used to. And the other thing to bear in mind with closed door games is it depends really what is at stake on the game. So, for example, that was a second leg of a last 16 Champions League game, and qualification for the quarterfinals was at stake. So, once the game started, the intensity of the game was no different to a time when there'd be 50,000 people in Parc de France, because the players still want to play, they still want to win, they still want to progress in a competition. Obviously, the dynamics of PSG so desperate to win the Champions League as well. So the match intensity didn't really change. So those dynamics are something we've already discussed as a select group this week, actually, in terms of preparing ourselves going forward. But there's quite a lot of experience within the select group of having officiated closed door games, both here and abroad. So it's certainly something that we can think about, but it's not something to overcomplicate.
If there was ever an advert for a behind closed doors game, it's probably that one. There was a lot going on and for a lot for you to deal with, considering you took away the whole atmosphere of many thousands in the stadium. As you said, obviously there's that much at stake at the top level. I can't see there being a drop.
Well, that's to be expected though, Cal, from a game that's got qualification for a quarter final. You know, and we'll see exactly the same even when the Premier League restarts. We've got, of course, there's the debate on whether it's not really much of a debate in many people's eyes whether Liverpool are going to win the title, but there's also the race for Champions League spaces. There's also big issues to sort out relegation-wise as well. So there'll be plenty of games without spectators that are played, where the intensity and the difficulty of the game will still be right up there because of what's at stake for the teams.
So I want to take you back well before your refereeing career started and back to your childhood, really, and just about your earliest first memories of football. What was your involvement in football growing up?
Okay, so the earliest first memories I have is obviously from when I was going to watch Altrincham in the 80s, 1986. They won the FA Trophy, beating Runcorn, and then late 80s, early 90s, they were really, really close to winning promotion to the Football League, and they fluffed it right near the end of the season. It was Barnet who actually pipped us to the title, I think, on that one particular season. But you know, my dad used to take me when I was a lot younger. But then me and a group of mates, we used to travel to we used to go to every home match, and we always used to go to virtually every single away game as well.
So you could say you were part of the Altrincham Ultras then growing up.
I'm not too sure Ultras is the right word, but you've been to some of the old Vauxhall Conference grounds like at Welling United and Slough Town and places, and it's not the kind of environment an Ultra would mix in.
So did you play growing up?
Only at school. So yeah, only at school. So it was very evident when I was at school that I was never going to play any higher than there, and I was really sporty when I was at school. So heavily involved in not just football, but I was a big rugby union player and cricket player as well. And so always, which obviously this is probably why my school works so and I like my cross country running as well. So 3 or 4 different sports that I used to be heavily involved in until I left school.
So when did your involvement in refereeing start, and when did you first take your course?
Right, so it was in the mid-90s, and it was purely because my mother was sick of me coming home after watching matches and complaining about the refs being terrible and costing us games and points. and all this. Very much probably like what you're like when you've watched me at games at Liverpool and stuff like that.
I'm not going. Well, normally I've got your back.
But so she's basically just said to me, either shut up whinging or go and give it a try. So I think back then in the mid-90s, the course was something like 4 evenings, sat in a room, and people just lecturing law at you. There was none of this practical training. There was none of the interactive stuff that we do now. It was literally 4 nights of this is law 1, this is law 2, this is law 3, and there's a written paper to answer, and that's your lot.
So did you start off in mini soccer, or did you go straight into adult football?
So I was 16 when I first started, and I went straight into open age. I never refereed kids soccer when I started.
And how did you find that going into the league around Altrincham as a 16-year-old kid?
Well, it was certainly eye-opening for anybody. So it's but it certainly builds your experience and your character quite steeply. So in those at that time, the Altrincham League and the Altrincham League and the Winchell Sunday League, it used to be 3 or 4 divisions in both leagues. Hundreds of teams playing. Most of the teams had semi-pro players who played at higher levels on a Saturday. This is before contracted players came in the semi-pro game. So there were people who were playing for places like Altrincham and Droylsden and Ashton United and Hyde, Stalybridge. We're all playing for teams on a Sunday morning like Jackson's Boat and the Temple, Earlham Catholic Club, and all these kind of teams. So you could have games at places like Wythenshawe Park with 200-300 people stood around watching. Quite feisty affairs, or in fact very feisty affairs. But then in turn that actually helped further down the line, because the lads who were playing on a Sunday morning, then when you work your way through to start refereeing them on a Saturday, and I went through the Northern Premier League, so from the Mid-Cheshire League into Northern Premier League, these lads already then knew me. So where some people were having to overcome the new referee tag, players keep it rather a bit simpler than we do. So they're going, well, he's been refereeing us for years and he's all right, so we're not going to cause him any problems, kind of thing.
And when you were moving through the grassroots pyramid, how many years did you spend at each level?
Oh, crikey.
Curveball.
Well, no. It's so at Supply League, it was a couple of years on the Cheshire League. I think the most challenging level to get through, certainly back then and maybe just as much now, is Contributory League at level 3, which is now level 3. So I spent 4 years at that, which was the longest time that I've really spent at any level before progressing, and it was the old challenge of balancing your performances with observers, club marks, and keeping everybody happy. And there's no real magic formula for that. If you tend to focus on improving observer marks, your club marks suffer, and vice versa. So it's very much about how you go out onto a game, and you just work as hard as you can to try and improve everybody's perception of you. And you're never going to keep everybody happy, but there's a balance you can strike, and that's the Contributory League at level 3 now. And as I found back then, that's the level that's the hardest to strike, I think.
Yeah, I mean, trying to strike a balance between club marks and observer marks is something that people are always searching for. It's probably one of the most difficult things as you move through.
Yeah.
Sort of level 4 onwards. So we all probably have a long list of people who've influenced us positively and negatively as we come through the pyramid. Who would you say were your biggest influencers coming through the grassroots game and then moving into, before you were onto the Football League and further afield?
I mean, locally, people should never underestimate the support locally. So the people who gave me my first breaks in my local area were local referee secretaries like Tommy Ryan, Tony Stevens, and excuse me, and John Nash, and then the Football League officials or Football League assistants at that time were people like Eddie Tarry and Dennis Phillips. So the local support network is really tight. I mean, one individual who I've had many dealings with over the years, particularly through the professional game, and very occasionally still now, because he's getting on a bit. He'll kill me for saying this, but still maintains a little bit of contact. Is Joe Worrell. So Joe, as many people in the Northwest will particularly know, Joe was one of our country's best domestic and international referees, and on a level through the 80s and 90s, did a lot of the top matches here and abroad. The UEFA Cup final, I think he did abroad. And one of the main things that I always picked up from Joe was about his attitude towards the game, towards learning, and towards other people. So, the honesty and humility aspect is something that's very, very important for me. And so it's not about always defending your corner. It's not about saying, I've not got promoted because of this one bad club mark or this one bad observation. It's more about how do we build rapport, build relationships with people, both within refereeing and within clubs and within leagues and competitions. And by building those relationships, it's then we can really start to influence things that happen on the field, but also things that happen off the field.
And were you a member of the Referees Association as you were coming through the grassroots game? And what can the RA do for grassroots referees and beyond?
Yeah, so I've been a member of my RA since I started, so 25, 26 years ago. And it's really just that level of support in terms of being able to sound off in your initial years about what's happening locally. But then a lot of people that you've had dealings with locally genuinely have a real sense of pride if people progress and they go to higher levels, which is nice to have, because it's the kind of ethos that we should all have with each other within refereeing. We should all want, of course, we're competing against people all the time to move to the next level, or for a cup final, or for whatever match we're aiming for. But we should really have a general ethos of that we want each other to get better. We want each other to do well, and that's very much an ethos that used to be on the show in Altrincham and still is now with the with the membership now. And I think it was 84 members last season. So we still got a good sized membership that is hopefully working together to try and move more people through and experience some of the fantastic experiences like I used to experience over the years.
You talk about honesty and integrity there. Would you say that's one of the best bit of advices you got as a grassroots referee, to always stay honest and true to yourself, but also to other people if you're challenged on decisions?
Yeah, honesty and humility has to be the fundamental qualities that any of us hold if we have any aspiration of succeeding, not just in football, but in any walk of life, really. It's all about, like I said before, it's all about building relationships. It's not about whether you're right or wrong. We have this huge obsession within refereeing. I need somebody to tell me I'm right or I'm wrong. And we keep going round asking people until we get to the answer we want to hear. Where really that's actually holding us back a little bit in terms of learning and developing. Because it's only one person's opinion, and we know how subjective situations are a lot of the time within football. So if we change our mindset slightly and we start thinking about, right, forget everything else, what can I do personally? What do I need to do personally to change and do something better next time? So if I'm annoyed with the mark I got off a club or an observer on this particular game, forget what the observer has said for a minute and have a look back and think, well, what could I have done differently there? You know, you've been proactive in something, and it's a huge challenge to get people to buy into a different concept, because this concept has been ingrained within refereeing for many years, way before I started. We're mark orientated and we're obsessed with being told whether we're right or wrong. And refereeing is a lot more about a lot more than that if you actually sit down and think about it.
No, that's good advice, and I think it's transferable to every level within the pyramid. I want to take you outside of refereeing now and into your job role before you become a full-time referee. And what was life like as a prison officer?
It was really good, actually, despite what people may think. Genuinely, despite what people may think. Obviously, it's challenging. But there's many jobs that are challenging. Working in the NHS is challenging. Being a police officer is challenging. Being a teacher is challenging, undoubtedly, at many times. But because of the certain situations you have to deal with, so obviously being a prison officer, it's not just about locking somebody up and dealing with violent people. That's obviously the core things that you've got to deal with. But you have to approach it in a slightly different way. So you're dealing with people, men, women, young offenders, who are obviously there for a reason, but there's very often an underlying reason why they have committed a crime or made some real poor choices in life that have landed them in prison. And that's normally some kind of traumatic event to do with family, work, a bereavement, something like that. But you also have to understand the wider picture. So when you're dealing, because basically when you work in a prison, you're allocated an area to work in. So for a period of time, I worked on the mainland, on the main wings in certain prisons. I then specialised in control and restraint. So for 8 years, I was a control and restraint instructor, so riot training and things like this. And then I also worked in segregation units and mental health bits where the more extreme levels of violence and self-harm took place. But it's not just as simple as locking somebody up, having to restrain somebody, or having to tell somebody no, because you've still got to deal with them for a 12-hour shift. Yeah. Or even at the end of your shift, you've got to come back tomorrow and deal with them again. So it's the best analogy is if you just shut the door on the problem and leave them there for 10 hours, you still got to come back and deal with that a day later. So it's very much along the ethos of using your personality to try and influence people, to try and get them to do things that maybe they don't want to, but will probably benefit them in the long run. So it's a challenge, but it certainly helped me develop my skill sets in terms of dealing with people and communicating with people in a variety of different ways, which is obviously then transferable to what any of us do out on the field.
So you could probably say that you're a specialist in dealing with difficult people.
if such a specialism exists.
So how would you say that your role as a prison officer, would you say it helped shape you as the referee you are today?
Yeah, to a degree, because again, like in any job you have to make split-second decisions. You have to engage and communicate with people. So it doesn't really matter whether you're a prison officer or anything else. Those qualities that we use on the field of play, you can take into any walk of life. But the one thing it probably did do was add some flexibility into how I would deal with situations, because there are situations that I've judged incorrectly on the film, the situations I've judged incorrectly at work. But it's how then you tweak things to make that situation better, or don't make that same mistake again going forward.
So coming back to football now, and moving into your Football League journey. So you became on the Football League list in 2006. How did you find the transition moving from the semi-professional game into the professional game?
Tough, because I only spent one season as a panel referee. So despite me refereeing about 80 odd games in that one season as a panel referee, because you were doing, as well as conference, you were doing all the reserve team games. It's a totally different ball game moving into the professional game. And the teams in the conference then were nowhere near as professional in terms of being full-time as they are now. So it was a huge step. And it's very much like somebody going from from level 4 to level 3 or level 3 to 2B. You know, you underestimate the step up at your peril, really. Not only because of the challenges that exist with more experienced players, but also the physical demands are significant every single step you go up.
So can you remember much about your first Football League game? I've got it wrote down here.
I do remember my first Football League game, and I remember the two teams, the two managers. In fact, one of the managers. So the game was Wrexham Peterborough.
Yeah.
So the manager of Wrexham was Dennis Smith, who is actually one of the Premier League delegates now, and he still reminds me of a game back in 2007 or something where I cautioned one of the Wrexham players and he missed a game or something that was important to the club. But so Dennis still goes on about that. And the other manager was Keith Alexander, who's sadly no longer with us. But I remember the game. Thankfully, it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The first game. There was a couple of games in the months after that. I think one at Hartlepool and one at Boston, which were real proper challenges. But yeah, I have fond memories of the first Football League, because of course it's difficult to get to the national list of referees, and it's even harder to stay there for any length of time. So you have to be proud of those moments when you do get them.
So you talked there about becoming a national list referee. At what point did you start to believe that you were going to become a Premier League referee?
Well, even then in 2006, the promotion to the Premier League seems a long way off. Because you tend to spend a season doing League 2 and League 1 games before you maybe get a taste of Championship and all this kind of stuff. And I was very fortunate that I had Steve Dunn as my coach in all 4 years that I was a football league referee. And one thing Steve taught me was about learning from your mistakes and really developing some real robust mental resilience to learn. So after those games I alluded to at Hartlepool and Boston, there was some real soul searching to go on about how I was dealing with players and how switched on I was with trying to prevent things happening. Because we worked hard for a couple of months, and I was really fortunate because I actually got to referee my first Championship game halfway through my first season, which was very unusual for a new referee. And I truly believe that's because Steve was one of the first people to really impress on me the importance of forget what's happened. Let's just make sure you don't do these things again. And if you can demonstrate that you don't do those things again, people will buy into what you're about, and people will be prepared to put more trust in you and give you some more opportunities to develop. And if it wasn't for Steve Dunn, that I might not have progressed as quickly in my earlier days as I did, because he was a really perceptive coach. He'd just come off refereeing list within a couple of years. And then he's obviously still a very perceptive coach because he's still working with the 2A lads on the conference.
have you ever struggled with dealing with criticism and negative feedback, and how's that changed through your journey from the grassroots game to the professional game? Because the criticism and sometimes negative feedback that you receive now is on a complete different magnitude to what you
only
have.
only sometimes.
Sometimes you have a game.
Well, look, the easiest way to think about it is if you're prepared for people to, if you just expect people to criticise you, then you'll never be disappointed. And one way I go about it is because, people will always want to have an opinion, whether that's an ex-referee, current referee, and there's plenty of current referees within the whole pyramid that are more than happy to have an opinions until it's one of their situations. And then equally, the media is a different scenario altogether. So the way I approach it nowadays is really I have no real interest in what's said about a decision. I don't need telling whether I'm right or wrong. I know when I'm wrong, and I know that my closest friends within the select group and my manager and my team, the members of my team, I know that they will tell me when I've made a mistake, honestly, and what we need to do to put it right. And that's always the starting point. Okay, if it's wrong, why is it wrong, and what do we need to do to make it better? So developing that mental resilience in terms of very rarely read newspapers. Fortunate that I'm not on any social media, so that's out the window. But it does frustrate me greatly sometimes where I see many referees, particularly lower down, constantly looking on club match reports and social media feeds and Twitter for any kind of positive and negative comments, where I don't really get it, because what good are they? Because okay, you like it when it says something positive, but let's be honest and realistic. It's very rare people say positive things about match officials' decisions at any level of the game. Yeah. Very rare. So why do we bother? We're better off focusing all our time and energy on what we can do better next time, rather than worrying about what other people are thinking.